This off. Welcome to the Iolande Argent show. I'm going to take off my glasses because I'm catching the glare of them in the screen.
Okay.
So, okay. And let me figure out a way to share the screen, and then I will find your presentation, which I put someplace.
Okay.
Wait, is that it? I think that's it. That's it, and there we both are. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start this from the beginning, and you just let me know. Does it play on its own, or should we kick it down, or?
Pardon me?
Does it play on its own, or do I have to hit the buttons?
No, it doesn't. It's manual.
Oh, good. Okay.
So you can just put the first screen up, or however you want to run it. And I can tell you, we can move to the next slide or whatever. Some of the slides are progressive, so once you have them in full screen, you'll see that. So.
Okay, and you know what I should have had you do? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Again, my name is James E. Thomas III. I am president and founder of J. Thomas & Associates, which is a personal career coaching firm, which I have had in existence for about 5 years. Prior to that, my firm supported human resource consulting assignments to companies and corporations, primarily domestically. Spent about 28 years of my life in corporate America doing human resources, and made the transition to consulting 10 years ago not only because of the economy, but it was the right time to do it. I had primarily spent a number of years in human resources, and it was time to do my own thing. And after now coaching approximately 400 people in the last 5 years and working on my third book and giving presentations to job seekers for the last 5 years to the tune of about now over 3,000. I felt the need to take the message a little broader, and I'm glad that Dr. Andy invited me onto the show. I'm not going to go into another 30 minutes of bio, so I think that's pretty much enough.
Okay, well, let me get back to the screen share here.
Okay.
And so there we go. Okay, and we'll go ahead and start this. Let me just, I'll tell you what, I'll give you control of the mouse, and let me start the thing here.
Okay.
And I'll give you control of the mouse, and then you could just walk us through your new program that we're talking about.
Cool. Well, this is, what you're seeing is the secret sauce to job search success and more. I put this presentation together about 3 years ago at the request of the Virginia Employment Commission. They have a number of individuals who, as you can imagine, are looking for their next job. But in many respects, they were having some challenges, as I think many job seekers are throughout America, if not throughout the world. And I think primarily because the rules are a moving target. They do change. Companies tend to raise or lower the bar in regard to who they're looking for, what kind of skills they're looking for. But what I realized was my clients were consistently challenged by not knowing what were the core rules that they needed to understand. And so through a lot of research, a lot of discussion with a number of really smart people, I realized that there were some very specific core needs and characteristics that people need to understand. And so for some time now, I've been putting on this presentation, and I'm glad to take it forward. So we can go to the first slide, and if this is working right, that's not working right. It's not working right. So
Okay.
maybe you should flip the next slide, and I can go from there.
All right, let's see if it'll let me do it. There you go. Is that it?
There you go. So I put this slide in my presentation. Actually, I do a number of different presentations, and this is a slide I've been using for a while now, and for a couple of reasons. One of the things I realized is that you have to have a baseline when you're talking with a number of people with varying backgrounds. And what better place to start than when we were all born? And what I realized after looking at virtually hundreds of baby pictures, that there are certain characteristics that we all have. We had them at birth. We still have them. How much we use them, though, varies based on how our lives have gone forward. So when I think about critical thinkers, and I saw this baby with eyes that just blew me away, and the inquiring mind, and a child with virtually no worries, an active listener, usually happy. I mean, these are characteristics we all have, and quite frankly, would love to be very proficient in. Are we? Probably not, because there are a lot of things that affect our lives, and unfortunately, those things that affect our lives have an impact on our success. Now, whether you're looking for a job, wanting to pay off the mortgage, pay the bills, find that significant other, stay healthy, whatever it is, and however you describe success, which I'm not going to do for you, we all do that for ourselves. There are barriers to us achieving success, and so when we get in a transition, and I use transition versus being unemployed, we start wondering, how and when am I going to get that next job? I mean, that's sort of the Friday night, Saturday morning discussion with yourself intellectually if you're laid off on a Friday. And Saturday morning, we wake up and sometimes we feel that we're a different person because our thoughts about the weekend prior to being laid off were totally different than Saturday morning after you've been laid off and you're sitting there realizing you don't have a job. And most of us think about all the material things we're going to lose. Boy, am I going to be able to pay the bill? Am I going to be able to handle the mortgage, college tuition, put gasoline in the car, whatever it is. And unfortunately, what I realize is that most people, when they're in transition, the first thing that we start thinking about are all the material responsibilities we have. And I'm not suggesting that isn't something that should be top of mind in some order, but what impact does that have on us getting that next job? That next job, by the way, which we sometimes take ownership of, as we did our last jobs, is probably part of the problem. Because when we were working in our last jobs and doing really, really well and getting bonuses and promotions and good performance appraisals, we assumed that, hey, we own this place. The boss said, look, we're gonna have a meeting in your office. You need to bring your goals to me so we can review them. Set up that meeting for the staff, and let's have it in your conference room. And all of a sudden you hear all these words that make you feel that maybe you possess this. Until that day, that infamous day, Friday, Monday, whatever day it was, when you were laid off, and they give you this really small box that didn't have your office in it, didn't have your executive assistant in it, didn't have the PC in it, and you walk out the door and you realize that, wow, I guess I didn't own this. And so what I've tried to make my clients very cognizant of is the fact that when you're working for someone else, as many of us do, most of our perhaps adult lives, the best we can do is in regard to a job when we're working for someone else is we're leasing that job. And different than leasing a car, we don't know when that lease is going to be up. So we should always be in a position of realizing that we don't own this, and so because we take ownership of something that we have no control over, when it's taken away from us, we feel really kind of bad. We feel that, geez, this is a challenge. So how do you get over this challenge and move forward to get that next job, which, by the way, you might also be laid off from? And I think it starts with how we quantify and qualify success. What really are we on this planet to do? And what I realized when I started my consulting firm some years ago was that I changed my whole dynamic of what I was grateful for, what I put major emphasis on. And to this day, I have never really been challenged by having clients that provide me with income to support them in whether they're working, because I do executive coaching, as well as those who are in transition. As I said, I've had hundreds of clients. Many have been referred to me, and probably I spend about 20% of my time marketing my firm. Now, if I throw that model out to most people, they say, boy, Jim, you have a failing business. How can you survive under those circumstances? Well, I do pretty well. One of the things I realize is that those things that are material to us, a job, money, whatever it might be, these are gifts that we, given the appropriate lifestyle, should be given. And we've lost some of the things that when we were children, we came to realize that, but then as we got older, we sort of forgot about. As an example, my son and we're getting close to that time of the year again. But my son, during most of the year, he's a really good kid. He does the things he's supposed to do. He's very grateful for what we as parents do for him. He helps others. He takes care of himself. He's just an overall good kid. But I can tell you, either before or shortly after Thanksgiving, he comes to us with this list. You know the list I'm talking about. It's his Christmas list. And as his parents, because of what he has done, we do everything we possibly can to provide him with as many things that are on this list that are reasonably appropriate to put on the Christmas tree. Us along with Santa, obviously, if there are kids listening. But that said, he does 80% of his piece, and we do the 20% to provide him with the gifts that he should get because of the way he lives his life.
Mm-hmm.
That's the challenge as adults we have forgotten about. We live our lives, quite frankly, and I can tell you, when I was growing up, my parents wanted me to have certainly a good education. They wanted me to go to college. They wanted me to focus on the fact that, Jim, you got to do all these things so you can get a good job. The whole focus is on having a job versus perhaps some of the other things that were even more important that I should have focused on. But be that as it may, most parents are like that with their children, so I'm not debating that or in a place of wanting to debate it. But what it does is it gives us a false assumption of how we get stuff. I work very hard in supporting my wife, my son, keeping up with my family, and making sure that I'm doing all the things as a father, as a husband, as a neighbor, as a mentor that I can do. And I spend about 80% of my time doing that. And the other part of my time, I focus on wanting to help people in my firm through the clients I have. But every client is a gift. And every client that comes to me is a paying customer, and I support them. But acquiring them wasn't as difficult as we tend to make getting that next job, as an example. My son doesn't assume that Christmas morning he's worked really hard to get what's under the tree, but he really has in regard to how he's maintained himself as a person. So he has no worries in that situation. And what I came to realize is that what differentiates those people who are generally and typically successful from those who are not successful more often than not. So I'm going to ask you to turn to the next slide, and I want to talk about this slide a bit. It's a sort of a reality test. You control your future. When I ask people in my presentation, you control your future, they look at me as if I'm from Mars because they don't perceive that they do, especially if they're sitting there, they're not working. They say, geez, if I control my future, I would have a job. I wouldn't be here listening to you, right? And so I have to get them through the fact that there are absolute things about their life that they control. So if you just flick the next button, I'll show you the first thing. I asked them first, attending the presentation. Like today, there are people online who made a concerted effort to dial in or to review or be on this presentation today at 2:30 Pacific time. Nothing was going to cause that to be different than what it was. It's absolutely happening in their lives. I'm here, you're here. We determined that at 2:30 or 5:30 my time on the East Coast, we were going to be on this presentation. And guess what? Ding, it happened.
Yeah.
We control that. And there are a lot of other things we control, like getting up in the morning and showering, decide what we want to wear, where we're going to have lunch, what we're going to eat. There are a lot of things that we control, and we really don't think very much of it because it seems pretty basic. But applying that basics to other things, like getting that next job or doing other things that are perhaps more important, perhaps in your life, is something we don't believe we necessarily control. But let's take another step at this. If you flip the next item, I'll talk about that. I asked typically the audience, in 30 days, you're going to take a vacation. And you're going to have $10,000 to take a vacation, and you're going to be away for 2 weeks. Now, I asked my audience to sort of imagine with me, but if you think about that, if you decided that in 30 days you were going to take a vacation, you had $10,000, and you're going to go away for 2 weeks with someone or with not, doesn't really matter. More than likely, your brain, your thoughts are going to start systematically working out every detail so that 30 days from now, there's not going to be a surprise. You're going to get on a plane, train, automobile, and you're going to go on your vacation. You will decide where to go. You'll decide how much money to take. You got $10,000. You'll decide what clothes you're going to take with you. You're going to decide if you need a rental car. You're going to go through all those details. So the 30 days from now, short of some major disaster going on in your life, you are going to go on vacation. And I'd say that 99.9% of most people who plan a vacation go on the vacation. They're not surprised that 30 days come or a month comes or 2 months come. Oh, I can't go. They go on vacation. And it's absolute. It happens. Now flip the next point, and I want to bring up the next thing. Let's assume the following. 30 days from now, you're going to have that next great job. Now, when I asked my audience this, I said, by raise of hands, how many think you will have that next great job in 30 days? As I asked them previously about the vacation and attending the presentation, which none of them had a problem with, I get this deer in the headlights look. I'm not sure that I can commit that 30 days from now I'm going to have a job. And I ask them, why? Well, I don't control whether I'm going to have that next job. I'm saying, you don't control whether you're going to have that next job? Who does? And they go through the list, the recruiter, the hiring manager, whomever. And therein lies the challenge. We believe that when someone else has ownership of something that we want, we don't have the ability to acquire that in a time frame that fits in sort of our universe. And that's the challenge that we have in life. There are many things that we want, but we don't believe we can get them because we perceive that other people control those things.
Right.
And that's the challenge when individuals go into an interview. If you've not been working for a while and you go into an interview, as one of my clients told me, he walked into a lobby one day. By the way, he didn't get the job. I'll fast forward. He didn't get the job that he was going to be interviewed for. He looked around. He said, boy, in his mind, he said, boy, I'm the only person in this lobby who's not working. And that was his thought going into an interview. So, relative to the success factors that might have affected him getting a job, he had already sort of stabbed himself a little bit in regard to acquiring what he wants. Having a winning attitude versus a losing attitude is not a mistake. It's not happenstance. It's based on some rather specific universal principles that we don't really apply to our lives because we were never taught those things. Unfortunately, because of the way the world works, many of the differentiators between those people who understand what causes success and those who don't seem to be almost hidden, not talked about, not put in perspective for those who want something as important in their lives as a job, clearly, so they can get on with what they want to aspire to use, like their intelligence, their skills, their experience to make a difference. And that's and certainly personally feel good about themselves. They're contributing. Contributing is more than just having a job. It's figuring out what do I need to do to make that happen. So if we could go to the next slide, we're going to get into some and from my perspective, this is probably one of the most important slides in this presentation. There's some other important slides, but this is sort of what I would call the heart, the pulse, the core of what differentiates those who are successful from those who are not successful. And I call it the first law. And if you click the next switch, I'll explain what it's all about. You can, and this is an absolute, and what I'm going to be talking about on this slide is all absolutes, and there are many examples that I can give. I'll give as many as I can in the time frame we have, but you can be, do, and have whatever you imagine. We all have an imagination. We imagine what we want, and unfortunately, if it doesn't show up Christmas morning or whatever time in our frame we're looking for it to show up, then we get disappointed. We feel that, well, maybe it works for others and doesn't work for me.
Right.
So let's go to the second law, which follows this. Well, there should be another.
There we go.
Okay. And if you go one more, the second law is you attract first what you fear most. Let me put that in perspective. When I ask my clients, what are your concerns regarding to what's on your mind? What are you thinking about more often than not? And they say, well, Jim, I'm really thinking about the fact that I can't pay my bills. or I'm having a hard time getting a job. It's always in the negative. It's always stated in the negative. Let me tell you how the mind works. Let me tell you how the universe works. And let me tell you how things work in regard to our imagination. We have the ability to imagine ourselves going to a meeting, and we attend that meeting on time. We imagine ourselves going on vacation, and we're out the door in 30 days on vacation. We imagine a job that we want, and then, however, we think of what could possibly cause that not to happen. But before we talk about the job, we think about all the things that we're dealing with real time that are inhibitors to us moving forward. Like my client saying, I can't pay my bills. And that's a concern. And I said, well, you need to understand, whatever you spend most of your time imagining and thinking about, that is what you're going to get. So let's put it in perspective. If you're spending most of your time saying, I can't pay my bills, I can't pay my bills. Every time a bill shows up, you open it up, I can't pay this, I can't pay this. That's what you're thinking about. That's what you're spending your dominant thoughts thinking about. Then that subconscious part of your mind is going to deliver more ability for you not to pay your bills, which means I can't deliver a job to you, because if I delivered a job, you'd be able to pay your bills. So it's important for, as I tell my clients, to be positive about what you want and minimize what you don't want to happen in your life. You don't want to be in a situation where you can't pay your bills. You want to focus on the job that you want. So putting things in a positive statement versus a negative statement. As simple as, I want to be in a position of being able to pay my bills versus I can't pay my bills. Big difference. You're on the other side of the equation. That being focused on I need to be in a position where I can pay my bills will start to cause you to imagine the position you want that will allow you to use your skills and experience to get that next job. They say, well, wait a minute, Tim, the hiring manager, the recruiter are going to stop me from getting that next job. And there we go again. We're back to that second law. You attract first what you fear most. And I would tell you, through society and through many people who I know who were very successful, when I talk with them about you attract first what you fear most, they look at me as, again, like deer in headlights. And they say, what do you mean? I said, well, don't you think about things that you can't accomplish? And they look at me and say, not really. I think about what I can accomplish, realizing there may be some barriers, but I don't focus on the barriers. I focus on what I want to happen, not what is potentially something that might inhibit my ability to get what I want. And so what I found as I got deeper and deeper into my clients, and quite hundreds of clients, talking with them about their job search, I realized that it was almost the 80-20 rule. 80% of their time, literally 80% of their time, they're thinking about the second law. They are attracting first what they fear most. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm a minority. I'm a woman. My hair's gray. I can go through a lot of other things, but I'm sure the audience understands what I'm talking about.
Right.
And probably have stated that themselves. Boy, I'm over 50. Boy, is anyone going to hire me? We attract first what we fear most. And those fears that we have create stress. And I'm not going to get into the big this universal discussion about stress, but the reality is that keeps us from achieving the success that we want. So if it's a job that you want, and clearly job seekers are wanting a job, then you're playing defense by invoking the second law more often than not. And so when I stop my clients and say, do you realize what you just said? And then specifically they'll say, I'll tell them or parrot back what they just said. They say, boy, did I just say that? They don't even realize how often they use the second law that affects their ability to move forward in their job search. And so as Zig Ziglar said very clearly, you've got to be before you can do, and do before you can have. A lot of people want to have something, but they don't imagine themselves being it first. And many of my clients, I try to get them to a place where, what is the next job that you want? Can you see yourself in that job? Can you imagine yourself getting up in the morning, going out the door, going to an office, wherever it might be, and doing what you say you want to do? And when they say no, and I'm saying, start that process. If you truly have the ability, the skills, the experience that you want to apply to that next position, and imagine what that next position looks like. And then focus on being in that situation. Because if you want to have it, you just can't go and say, well, and most of us, quite frankly, that's how we work, right? We see something, I want to have that, I want to have that, I want to have that. And when we don't get it, we feel that we're challenged by the fact that, geez, all these things I really want to have, I never get. It's something that's very simple that I say to my clients. I have them do the red light exercise as part of my book. But one of the things I was brought up realizing and told by my grandparents many, many years ago and that is, they used to say, "Boy, Jim, you always want this stuff, but you have to be grateful for what you have right now." And I didn't really figure that out and how important that was until I got a little older and realized that many people want to move forward in their lives, but they're not grateful for what they have right now. And I put in a keeping something or losing something category. Anything that's material that I have, I can replace. So the things that I'm grateful for are things like my health, my wife, my son, good friends, neighbors, those things that I can't replace. And so if you focus on those things regard to realizing that if you take care of those things, then you can be grateful for other things that you ultimately get that may very well be material, like a job, because a job is something that can come and go, and that's the challenge that many people have. They start down this road of getting into a job, and then when it's taken from them, their mind's taken from them, then they feel a loss. I've lost something. Well, I feel a loss when I have ownership of something and it's taken away. When I'm leasing, let's say, a car, and it's time for the lease to be up and it goes away, I don't mourn, I don't go into some major stressful situation. I say, well, hey, time's up, and you move on.
Right.
Most people, unfortunately, put the job in a similar situation, something they own. Consequently, it's the whole concern in our society now that is causing, I think, many people who probably should be retaining their positions to be putting themselves in a situation where they're being laid off because they're attracting first what they fear most, and that is, gee, what if I get laid off? I think they're going to lay me off. And then when it happens, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's sort of what has happened by virtue of your thoughts about what you really want to happen in your life. Much like coming to a meeting, going on vacation, it's a similar path that we follow. And unfortunately, we follow more of a negative path when things aren't going our way, and we concentrate on what could go wrong. And that's why I try to submerge and minimize my clients focusing on the second law. And in many cases, once that switch is turned, they start realizing that they have a clearer view of the path they want to take. It's much like they reset their GPS, and now I'm focused and I know where I want to go, and I'm not thinking about all the barriers of to getting there. And that's the challenge that we have. How do we eliminate the second law? And what I quite frankly challenge my audiences to do. And I said, look, over the next week, you're going to run across a number of people who are going to invoke the second law, and you'll come to your reality how often individuals are playing defense against things that affect their success. And it's sort of a truism. I mean, put it out there and you realize, and I've had any number of individuals who send emails like, Jim, gosh, it wasn't 24 hours later than my neighbor or my wife or my spouse or someone said something that was negative based on just a conversation we're having. They put things in negative context, which they realize, geez, am I doing that too? Am I affecting my ability to move forward because of what I'm thinking about and what I'm imagining? And the answer is absolutely yes. And so the challenge is, how do we get to the place where our lives are more based on what can be that reality we want, vis-a-vis the first law? You can be, do, and have whatever you imagine, and minimize thinking why it won't happen. Think about all the things that will stand in its way of happening, and everything that we have, from cell phones to tables to chairs to houses to buildings to jobs to technology, all came from someone imagining these things happening. And they became reality because they minimized the second law. And if they didn't do that, we wouldn't have what we have today, and that is a society filled with imagined objects and technology and science and medicine. And you just, think about it. Everything we touch, someone imagined it. They didn't touch it. They didn't think about, well, I'd love to be the person who could cure polio, but I'm not sure if I could come up with a polio vaccine. So they didn't jump down to that second law. They went through the process of imagining and determining, how could I work through this process? They may not have been successful initially in many instances, clearly, but the reality is they didn't fall to prey to that second law. Because if they did, many of the things that we relish and see as maintaining a very enjoyable lifestyle would not exist today. Because someone had to imagine it first and foremost. So let's move to the next slide, because I want to get through something that is a challenge. And this is part of the secret sauce that I apply to a lot of my clients, all of my clients, matter of fact. And it really moves them in a direction where they start saying, they have that aha moment. Yeah, geez, I really have been applying that second law to many of the things that have been inhibiting my ability to move forward. Not only from a job perspective, and perhaps other facets of their life too. But I want to talk about a resume, because one of the things I'm really, really, really challenged by are the terrible resumes that I see. And I say terrible because in the course of the year, I see virtually thousands of resumes. And most resumes, because of maybe where I live or the backgrounds of many of the people I work with, are chronological type resumes, where it's, personal information, professional summary, professional experience, education, the things that I list in this format. And by the way, if someone's job history goes back beyond 10 years, you might have a subcategory called prior professional experience, where you just list the company and the position they had, so you don't go into a lot of detail to minimize going beyond the 2 pages, okay? Because my resume is about 7 pages if I put it all out there, and that's not right. But bottom line, I have been so challenged by the mistakes that people make on resumes, and I'm beyond typos and maybe formatting. The thing that really gets me, which I've quite frankly vetted through recruiters and hiring managers, is this next piece. And if you could click on the next button, I want to talk about professional experience. And most resumes that I read, when I read the bullets regard to the information about the positions that individuals have, they read more often than not like job responsibilities. This is what I did when I was marketing manager, yada, yada, yada. And that's wonderful, okay? But I could Google marketing manager and find out what your job responsibilities are. That's not distinguishing you from anyone else.
Right.
So if you click on the next piece, it's really not job responsibilities that should be following those bullets. What should follow those bullets are your job accomplishments and results. What did you do when you were in that job? Did you increase sales? Did you reduce costs? Did you do the things that speak to what is in quite frankly, your goals that you had for the year in the positions you had, or on your performance appraisals? The job accomplishments that you did, the results that you had, distinguish you from anyone else who might even be holding that same title. And that's what hiring managers, that's what recruiters are looking for. They want to determine what is distinctive about you. And the only way you can distinguish yourself is say, these are the things I did when I held this position. Not, this is what my responsibilities are, because that's the same responsibilities anyone would have holding that title.
Right.
Now, by the way, Dr. Andy, there are occasions where individuals might want to indicate, okay, this is a brief description of my responsibilities in the job. If you want to use 2 sentences to do that, or 1 sentence to do that, that's fine. But those bullets that speak to your job that you held should be job accomplishments and results. That's what should be following your position, every position that you list, short of those prior experiences that might go back beyond 10 years. That's going to put you in a category where your resume is going to be read. Someone's going to see from your resume that you are different than the second resume that they read. And that's going to cause you to be higher up on the list of candidates that they're going to want to be looking at. And that's what you want. You want your resume to pop, to stand out from someone else's resume when they read it. But when the recruiter, and my wife, by the way, is a recruiting manager, and she says, Jim, you're right. Geez, most of these positions that we're looking at on resumes, all they talk about is their responsibilities, and it doesn't help us determine whether they should be brought in for an interview or a phone screening. So keep that in mind. Job accomplishments and results are so important that that's what should be on your resume, under the category professional experience. Everything else is pretty much, generic relative to information that's It's pretty simplistic to understand. I still see, unfortunately, though, that individuals, put the years that they graduate from college, get that off of there. It's more than just whether or not someone can determine your age from that. It's just not format savvy anymore. That's not something that's on resumes today.
Right.
And the next question one of the questions I always get with Tim, I'm having a hard time putting my resume together. I really don't know how to put together a resume. Could you help me? Or is there a firm that writes resumes? And sure, there are tons of resumes firms, as you know, Dr. Andy, that someone can go to and spend hundreds of dollars having someone prepare a resume. And guess what they do? Click on the next button. They do what anyone can do, and that is the next one after this, sorry. They can go to Bing search or Google, and I did a Bing search on, click the next button, on just resume templates.
Uh-huh.
And I came up with, click the next button, 10 million. 10 million hits. Now, I'm sorry, if you want to pay me $750 or $1,000 to do your resume, I guess if I wanted to take your money, I could do that. But most people are intelligent enough, and most people have access to the internet where they can spell resume templates and find probably a formatted resume or template that aligns with how they would like to lay out their resume. And by the way, they're the ones that have all the information about themselves. And putting that information in a resume format is pretty simple once you have a template to work from. And so now I got to tell you, most of my friends who are resume writers don't like me saying this, but the reality is that it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put together a resume. It really doesn't.
No, but it takes a really good resume writer to make somebody who is too lazy to know that shine and get them in front of a hiring manager.
No doubt. And I have people who are paid well to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also share with you that it's sort of the 80-20 rule. I would say that 80% of the people probably could put together their resume in a pretty decent format. And if they could do that, and they want someone to review their resume that might give them a level of assurance that, your resume is in pretty good shape, whether that be a resume writer or a recruiter or someone else, they could probably minimize the cost of having a resume done. I guess that's the bottom line.
Right.
I get really concerned when people, and I know lots of people who paid well over $500 to have a professional resume done. And when I look at the resumes and the information there, and I say, okay, where's all this information coming from? And they say, well, I gave this information to them, and they sort of scripted it in a way that made it sound good and whatever. But it's the value add sometimes is not necessarily that much, and that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your resume vetted and reviewed by someone, but I think the first stroke with the paintbrush should be yours. You should put it together initially and see what it looks like, and then have it seen by someone who might be that expert, who might be able to fine tune it. It's like you're playing the violin, but you may need a tuner to tune it slightly. But ultimately, it's your resume. You should be comfortable with what's there. And sometimes people aren't. They really have, they're not really sure all the information that's in their resume because they didn't write it. So that's just something to think about as you're having a resume done. If we could go to the next slide, I want to move along because I really want to get to the last two slides pretty quickly.
LinkedIn.
I am surprised, Dr. Andy, how many people I still meet today in presentations who, when I say, by raise of hands, how many people are not on LinkedIn? And half the audience goes up. And I'm saying, are you kidding me? And I say that only from the standpoint it is one of the only, and you can click the rest, by the way, because I can go through it. It's the most professional social networking site available. Recruiters are all over LinkedIn. They are looking for people every day. Executive search companies, researchers are on LinkedIn every day trying to identify individuals for positions. It's still a place that gets a lot of visibility by recruiters, by hiring managers, and it's an outstanding resource for individuals who are job seekers, individuals who are wanting to fine-tune their career in some way. And so I encourage everyone to be on LinkedIn. And by the way, if you're going to be on LinkedIn and you fill out a profile, fill it out 100%. And I say that because there are individuals who say, well, I don't know that I want to put my picture up on LinkedIn. I say, well, if it's the picture with you in a bikini, that's probably not the picture you want to put on LinkedIn. You want to have a professional headshot. You want something that represents you in a professional way. But I can also share with you that, and it's been primarily executive search firms who told me this, researchers. They said, if I go to someone's profile and it's not been filled out with pertinent information, I just move on. Because they say, look, if they don't have the time or the interest to fill out their own profile completely, then maybe they're too lazy to fill out an application. Maybe it's an indicator that they really are wanting to hold something back that they're concerned about. So they're guarded about moving forward with individuals who don't have a completed profile. And I've seen a number of profiles that are they're blank of a lot of information. And that can have an impact if you're a job seeker wanting that next job, if you're not willing to fill out the information that's being asked of you. I'd also say that we all know people we work with who thought well of what we've done, and you should absolutely reach out to those individuals and get recommendations from them in regard to their past experience with you as a colleague, as a manager, as someone who they work with. Because the neat thing about recommendations on LinkedIn, as you know, Dr. Andy, the individual can't change that information. Only the person filling out the recommendation can change the information. You can either accept or not accept it, but you can't change it. Unlike an email that comes to you, you can edit and do all kinds of stuff with it. But you can't do that with the recommendations you get from individuals. And that's why recruiters are all over those recommendations. They realize that this is something that someone's saying about you, much like a reference. If they call someone, it's going to be unscripted. It's going to be exactly the way they want to tell it. And you haven't interceded in a way to change it or embellish it, make it better. It's what they want to say about you. So it's important to have that out there because it gets recruiters interested in you, obviously, if the information is certainly interesting about you. And they're more inclined to want to place that call to you to find out how your skills may align with the positions they have open. So I highly recommend that individuals get on LinkedIn, get familiar with the jobs that are posted, get involved with groups that align with your background, to get visibility. And that's one of the bigger issues missing with a lot of folks that are in a job seeker situation. They are not visible. The only way they're visible is through the applications they're filling out on LinkedIn or Dice or Indeed weekly, but they're not personally visible. So networking is so important, and LinkedIn gives you that opportunity to be visible. So that's something that I highly recommend individuals do. The next two slides, before you turn them on, I just want to sort of give some background relative to the next two slides. I was having a very, let's just quickly go over the book. I wrote a book called Want That Job, What You Need to Know Right Now. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it, only to say that there are 8 competencies and skills that I found very pertinent for job seekers to be cognizant of and very skillful at that I wrote about. Book's got a lot of visibility. I wrote it in 2011. I'll probably revise it this year or next. But it's really helped job seekers to understand those areas that they need to be proficient, like having goals. If you are a job seeker and you don't have a goal, then what's that all about? I mean, you want a job, that's fine. What is that job? Where is that job? What kind of company do you want to work for? There are things that you should be focusing on that align with the goal you want to achieve in the next job that you want to have. Your communication and social skills are extremely important. Your drive to win. This is not, if you were competing for something, and clearly you're competing for that next job, you're not competing to lose. No one ever competes to lose. That's not in the DNA of someone who's competing. We all compete to win. Are we going to be successful all the time? Not necessarily, but we don't compete with the mindset that, boy, I'm out there, boy, I can't wait to get out there and lose. That's not how we think and process winning. Winning is, the drive to win is very important in the job search. It minimizes the second law, meaning, you attract first what you fear most. It keeps you focused on your goals, what you want to accomplish. Your emotional intelligence, if you're fearful, if you're stressed, if you're depressed, you're getting disappointed about how things are going, that's going to have an impact on how you come across in interviews, in phone screenings, in opportunities to network with people. And that's very important to understand. Your networking ability is extremely important. Your ability to meet with other people and be engaging. is a characteristic that many hiring managers, recruiters are looking for. And if you don't have those characteristics, it's going to be very difficult for you to get to the next round of interviews beyond perhaps even a recruiter. I'm not going to go through the others, only to say that these are important characteristics that every job seeker and everyone wanting to achieve a position, whether they're being even interviewed for a higher position in a company where they may already be working, need to be proficient in. And I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay.
Next two slides before we move on.
More secret sauce.
More secret sauce. The next two slides, and this is one of them, I spent about a year interviewing over 80 hiring managers and recruiters, because I was very concerned that when some of my clients came back from interviews and I said, what happened? They said, well, they thought things were well, but the fit wasn't right and they're not going to proceed. And I'm probably not going to be asked back for further stages of the interview process. And I said, well, what do you think went wrong? And what they were saying was okay generally, but I realized that, if I was in the room like a coach and I was listening to the hiring manager and the client talk about and go back and forth with questions and answers and questions, I would probably pick out things that my client probably could do better. It might enhance their ability to get that job offer. And I realized that what I was getting back wasn't helping me. All I was getting back was chemistry, fit, the same old stuff I used to use when I was interviewing people, okay? So I went out and I talked with hiring managers and recruiters, individuals who many of them I knew, others I said, look, I'm a career coach and I really need to have some in-depth information. And they shared with me honestly what they used as criteria to either hire someone or not hire someone beyond just the job description. And so I put together these next two slides, the first one you have up, to share with my audience in presentations that I give, to make them aware that, look, this is information that's written down anywhere. It's not in a book yet. I haven't written the book. But it's information that I'm getting from individuals who are credible in their field, that are making a difference because they are the gatekeepers from you getting from not having a job to having a job. And I put the first slide, what hiring managers like about you, in three categories. The first one, how you think. The second, personal and social characteristics. And third, your work ethics. And when I talk through, team-oriented, problem solver, ask good questions, these are all things that those 80 plus people told me about. And that was sort of, in many cases, I just let them talk, and many of them shared this information with me at separate times. It wasn't group meetings, these were one-on-one meetings. There were other things they shared, but in many instances, this is what, quite frankly, came out of the mouths of most of those 80 plus people consistently. So that's what I hone in on, and that's what's here relative to how you think. Ask good questions. Are they flexible? Critical thinking, customer focus. These are the things that they were aligning and putting together questions on, and these are characteristics they were looking for in those individuals who they liked. I'll go through all of them, but the personal and social characteristics, you can see there's quite a few things here which speak to individuals being engaging, personable. They're looking for real people who are coming across as dynamic and positive about themselves. Not, oh, I'm not working, would you please give me a job? They're looking for people who are very positive about themselves because they're going to be working with other people, and they want people who bring energy to the workforce. And in many cases, if someone has been interviewing, they haven't been offered positions for a while, they might not feel the best about themselves. They may feel, geez, maybe I'm not worthy, I'm not ready. They're talking themselves through all those you attract first what you fear most, second loss situations. And third, under your work ethic, hiring managers, recruiters are very focused on individuals being quality conscious, they were goal oriented, and they were trustworthy. And that's what hiring managers liked about the individuals who, by the way, with these characteristics coming forward, these are individuals they were more apt to hire than not. Let's turn to the next slide, and we can conclude with the next slide. But these are things that will stop hiring managers from hiring you, and I say you, the job seeker. There's a lot of sort of a shotgun approach to information here, but as I go through some of the things like a poor handshake. When I give presentations that are less than 100 or so people, I try to stand in the front by the door and shake everyone's hand who comes through the door. And sometime during my presentation, I explain why I did that, because one of the things that's been brought to my attention more often than not by hiring managers is that, people come in and they shake my hand and I can tell from a handshake, whether this is someone who is going to fit in the organization or not fit. And I said, well, what are you really talking about here? He says, well, they won't look at me in the eye when they're shaking my hand, or the handshake is sort of limp. It doesn't feel like they have any energy or, behind them. And I'm not saying a vice grip, but, there's very distinct characteristics of shaking someone's hand that everyone who's feeling good about themselves should do. And the one thing is, you always look at the person's face. You should always have face-to-face contact when you shake someone's hand. And I go through about 3 or 4 people in my audience, and I shake their hands, and I say, look, how many of you in your lifetime have ever missed a handshake? And no one has. Why is that? Because we have peripheral vision. And when we take our eye test, it's usually horizontal. But you have 360-degree peripheral vision. So when you're going to shake someone's hand, you can look right in their eyes, and you can still see their hand if it's not down like at the floor. So if it's in your peripheral vision, which is usually about 3 feet up and down, you're not going to miss a handshake. That's why we don't. But when you come to someone and you're looking down because you're so nervous about missing the hand or feeling that, well, I want to make sure that I give the right impression, you're putting yourself in a very subservient, I'm not worthy position. Your head's down, and you're looking like, I'm not ready, I'm not worthy. And the hiring managers are picking up on this. And that's what they shared with me. So something as simple as a handshake can have in that 1 second or 2 seconds, can have a dynamic impact on you getting a job. And individuals say, whoa, I did that. And so many of them asked, did I do that when I came to the door, when I shook your hand? They didn't want to know whether they passed the test. And I said, some of you did, some of you didn't. But the reality is we never miss a handshake because we do have that peripheral vision. And as you're approaching someone, if you have your hand out, you can probably see the other person's hand if you're looking him right in the face. So I go through that because these are the kinds of things that when you're unemployed and the hiring manager's thinking this person perhaps is unemployable, you're thinking, what's wrong with you? If you come forward with things that are right with you, then you distinguish yourself in a category that says, this person may very well be someone that I should be talking to today and I perhaps should hire. But there are other things like, no energy, being overbearing, disrespectful, late to the interview, which should never happen, but it does happen. Someone saying they're perfect for the job. No one is perfect for any job. And you're meeting with a hiring manager who has deficiencies. They know they're not perfect in their job. And they have a difficult time when someone says, well, I'm perfect for this position, when you haven't spent 1 day in the job, 1 day in the company, 1 day in the culture, not knowing really how your skills and experience are going to relate. And you may very well make some little mistakes when you get into the job, not something they're going to fire you for. But in the interview process, I don't think, and hiring managers told me, I don't hire too many people who say they're perfect for the job. So it's something that we should think about as we're going into an interview. Too friendly or familiar. This hiring manager or recruiter is not your new best friend. They're a professional who's trying to make a decision about whether or not you're ready to be brought into the organization and be given a paycheck and responsibilities and authority to do a job. First and foremost, 5 years later, if you guys become friends, wonderful. But the first day, sharing personal information or asking an individual about what they're going to do with their weekend, if you're having an interview on a Friday, is really inappropriate. And this is information, by the way, that hiring managers and recruiters are sharing with me. Inconsiderate, not prepared, and that speaks to the kinds of questions that individuals ask. It's so important that everyone do their due diligence and research. We live in a world of the internet. There's not a lot of information about a company or a person that we can't find out if we just put on our wrinkled raincoat and be that detective or sleuth and go out there in technology and look up stuff. And in some cases, you may find that you go through internet, or through LinkedIn, you may know someone or find that you're connected with someone at that company who you may reach out to, who may share other information about culture and information. Asking a culture question or what's the vision of the company are really inappropriate questions because that information is readily available on most companies' internet site. So the hiring manager really doesn't want to take time talking about the vision or the culture of the organization, because that's something in your due diligence you should know before you even interview. So that distinguishes, again, individuals who ask poor questions from those individuals who ask good questions. Disaster interviews or references, and I'll end with this. As many times as individuals come to interviews, and I'm talking they're beyond the phone screen, they're being now brought in for an interview, and sometimes recruiters will ask, more often than not, recruiters will ask, bring in 3 or 4 references with you so that we can have those. And of course, you're now getting excited and you'll say, sure. So you bring in 3 references with email addresses and phone numbers, thinking that's what you should be doing. And I tell all of my clients, never, 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 never do that. In this age of technology, if you forget to bring in those 3 or 4 references, you certainly can get home after the interview and spend 2 seconds sending an email to the recruiter or to the hiring manager, whomever, with references you want to provide. It's not like you got to mail them in or phone them in. It's easy to do. More importantly, there are things more often than not that you're going to find out during the interview that's going to have a direct bearing on the references you want to provide. So you could very easily give 3 references of people who you think are the right people for representing you with that company, and then after you're in your car going home, say, oh my goodness, John wasn't really the right person, Sally's the right person, but you've already given the list to the recruiter who may already be on the phone or sending emails to those people during the time you're taking an interview with the hiring manager. So that's a problem. And it's been a problem because, quite frankly, recruiters have told me that they've called individuals who were references given by the candidate, and the individuals didn't know the person was interviewing, weren't really sure if they really had the aptitude, the background for the positions they were interviewing for, and they were disasters. And that had a direct bearing on whether an offer was made, no matter what the hiring manager thought about the person in the interview. So it's so important to understand that you're always going to have time to give references. And just because they're being asked for like today, doesn't mean you can't give them this afternoon or tomorrow. Because they've whittled you down from maybe hundreds of people down to 3 or 4 people they want to interview. So for not providing references initially, it's not going to cast you out as someone who they're not ultimately going to give consideration for hire. What's most important is you give the right references, and those right references will be better known to you after you have interviewed with the hiring manager. So that's something that, again, recruiters have told me. They say, yeah, we ask for references, but it's sometimes better that individuals don't, given the kinds of references they give. So these are the kinds of things that will stop hiring managers from hiring individuals. Now, what you can see from this slide, and I know we're winding down here, but what you can see from this slide is that most of this information is very subjective. It's not the kind of information that hiring managers, recruiters want you to really know. They're never going to tell you to your face, you have a poor handshake, so we're not going to hire you. Because that's not in the job description, okay? So this information and much of the decisions made about hiring someone are made based on subjective characteristics, subjective things that are seen and heard during an interview. Because assume the following: if you're brought in for an interview, you already have the skills and experience to do the job. They're not going to waste their time with someone who's not qualified to do the job. They're trying to find other things about you, the human, that will distinguish you from some other individuals who will place you in the workforce, and you can be engaging and positive and energized and relate to the people that you're going to be working with. And so therefore, many of the things that are on this slide are subjective, but they represent how hiring managers, recruiters, distinguish you from others in a very, in their minds, objective way. But if you don't know this stuff, and you walk in and have a poor handshake and your head's down, or you're a poor communicator, or you give disaster references, or you're anxious or you're disrespectful, it's going to have an impact, absolute impact on you getting a job. More often than not, you're not going to be offered a job. So I wanted to share this with in my presentations and with my clients so that they don't do these things. And more importantly, they do the things on the first slide that I showed in regard to the things that hiring managers and recruiters are really looking for. And it has made a difference in individuals getting jobs sooner than going through 4 or 5 or 6 interviews before they realize, gee, something's wrong here. Maybe I should do something different. And in many cases, they never find out about many of the things here unless a recruiter tells them. So, had you get better references, maybe we may have considered you more strongly. And the challenge with that is that many recruiters are not going to say that because they don't want to take the potential risk of being sued. So much of this information is rarely, if ever, discussed by recruiters and hiring managers. And those of us who used to be hiring directors and vice presidents in human resources absolutely slap people's hands for doing those things, like saying to a client, we didn't hire you because you really are a poor communicator, or you were too friendly in the interview. Those are things that are could be a challenge for companies to defend if someone came back and said you discriminated against me or whatever the case may be. But this is the kind of information I'm sharing with my clients so they are better prepared to be successful. And that's the whole purpose of how I focus on providing advice and counsel to my clients and during my presentations. I want those individuals to distinguish themselves armed with the information that's going to make them more successful than not, because that's the whole goal, get them back to work sooner than later. So that's sort of the information that I want to share. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity and this time to share this with your audience. And if anyone has questions or they want to reach me directly, my website has a contact page, and I'd be pleased to assist anyone who has some challenges they're going through, because I think there are many that need some support beyond trying to figure out on their own. And I'd be pleased to support however I can. I strongly recommend picking up my book if you have the opportunity. But at this point in time, I'd like to thank Dr. Andy for inviting me on, and this has been hopefully an opportunity to share some worthwhile information.
No, I appreciate you coming back on, as always. A wealth of information. We're going to have to get together one of these days and do that in the reverse, and trade stories about all of the bad recruiters that I've run into as a job coach, who do exactly every one of the things that you had on your that second to the last slide.
Yeah.
They are culpable of doing every one of those bad things, right down to the horrible handshake. Mm-hmm. These are the people who are in a position to tell somebody else that they are bad at doing something, and you're just looking at them going, yeah, okay.
And the challenge is they want something you want. And I would just close with this, Dr. Andy. Mm-hmm. Every individual looking for a job, the recruiter, hiring manager are not the reasons why they're not getting the position. We control our destiny totally. So we can get beyond whatever issues we have with a 30-year-old hiring manager or recruiter who doesn't have a lot of experience, but they have the title, and they're sort of, in your mind, standing in your way to the position you want. So there are things to be learned, and I absolutely agree with you. There are individuals who are holding positions as gatekeepers who have not been properly trained, have issues, have bias. They're not going to hire you if you're 32 years old and someone comes in who's 55, and you're saying, boy, this person in your mind, they're as old as my mom and dad. Why should I hire them? Or whatever bias you have generationally. Those are the challenges that job seekers are having. But it's how you present yourself. How do you come across? Do you come across as someone who's older, or do you come across as someone who is wiser? Right. What do you want to come across? Because there's a distinct difference. As I share with my friends, my last corporate position I got when I was 56 years old. And I was hired by a CEO who at the time was 42. Now, under normal circumstances, because I was not working, one would assume, geez, did you pay for that job? I mean, did you bribe them? How did that happen? There they are. There she is, or he is.
Yep, this is nice. My secretary cat. I told you he would pop up here.
Yep, there we go. But I think those are the things that we have to look at and realize that we have a lot of control, whether we're working or not. We have a lot of control, and sometimes we give up that control primarily because of the second law. We attract first, we fear most. If we can just get our heads around understanding that and how that impacts, more importantly, how that negatively impacts our lives and what we want to accomplish, we can achieve great things. We can achieve many things that we thought we couldn't, because we will rule out attracting first what we fear most, because we won't have any fear. We'll jump in the deep end of the war knowing that, we'll figure this out. It'll be okay. We are safe beyond what we imagine sometimes. We really are safe beyond what we imagine. We have a lot of things working for us, and the biggest force we have working against us, unfortunately, is ourselves. And that's what we have to flip that switch. So thank you for the time. It's always a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
I hope your audience picked up something from this, and I look forward to chatting with you another time.
Okay. Have a good evening.
You too. Take care.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this edition, and thank you, James. We'll see you back again, and apparently the Secretary Cat is saying it's that time.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.